Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mupo and Friends. We are,
Jocelyn Pearson,
and I'm Michelle Mupo.
and we're brought to you by Mupo TV.
And you can catch all our shows and others at www.mupotv.com. So tune in Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I got to tell you, Jess, we had some pretty amazing guests come on our show and tell us things that they've never told anyone before.
They sure have. They sure have. It's awesome to hear some of these little nuggets that no one can find anywhere but on Mupo and Friends. So, Michelle, did you have a Mupo awesome week?
I did have a Mupo awesome week. How about you? Did you have one?
I did, yes.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to get into a little bit on the Mupo Awesome Week because I think we're going to start doing lives. I don't even know if I told you, but we need to start doing some lives. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. So, on that note, we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll be back with our special guest.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mupo and Friends. Our special guest today is a model, actress, writer, director, and producer. After becoming a model at age 13, she acted in several films, including the Drake Dormus film Newness. Taking her career into her own hands, she became the writer, director, and producer of the award-winning short film Blue Moon. Please welcome Emily Ruhl. Hi, Emily. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Emily, thanks for coming on the show. So, I'm going to ask you, how did you parlay the skills you've learned from the modeling world into the film world?
I think modeling, it gave me a very clear idea of what looked good in a frame and what looked good in film. And I think that was really helpful when it came to what I wanted in my cinematography. It also, I think, experiencing the fashion industry at such a young age gave me an idea of what my personal aesthetic was and my relationship to clothes and fashion and how that really told a story. I think was definitely influenced from all of the different photo shoots and stylists that I'd worked with as a kid.
That's awesome. So, what about the film Casablanca made you want to go into the business?
I think the storytelling and how much it moved me and the different story arcs and the character development and how it really is kind of the perfect story and the ending is so wonderful, not to spoil anything, but I think that it's not only kind of audibly beautiful, it's also very visually beautiful, and to do both of those things, to have a great story and shoot it well, is very difficult, and it's kind of the perfect combination of both of those things, and it's so romantic. I mean, who doesn't want to be in Casablanca? So that did it for me.
True. And what is the deciding factor that made you branch out, you know, to change and become an actor, to go through that?
It kind of happened by accident. It was a happy accident. I live in LA, and I was working out with my old trainer, as most of us do in LA. And I wanted to get out of working out for like 5 minutes. So I was like, let's take a selfie. And my trainer put that on his Instagram. And then, long story short, my now manager went to high school with my trainer and saw that photo and said, who is this girl? Does she act? And I hadn't really acted much since I was like 12. I did a lot of musical theater as a child. And it felt like a natural transition to me. I think I wanted something a little bit more challenging. And so that happened, and I signed with my manager and then booked like my second or third audition, which was the Drake Dreamus film that went to Sundance. And that got me an agent, and that kind of like started this whole transition. So it wasn't really even a cognizant decision. It just kind of all happened, and I rolled with it.
Cool. So, where did the idea for Blue Moon come from?
So, Blue Moon is a little love story that takes place in a single night. It's kind of a snow globe of a experience, and it's twofold. So, I had an experience of kind of that love in a single night. I went on a couple of dates, and I ended up getting friend zoned, but it's okay because I made a movie about it. And he's actually also the guy that friend zoned me is in my next project, so everything comes full circle. But we went on this date, and I just thought it was really magical, and I liked this concept and exploring the concept of love that maybe doesn't span years or decades, but just a night or just a couple of nights, and how that's still just as meaningful in a lot of ways, and really can shape your idea of romance. And then one of my best friends recently started dating women, and she was talking about her experiences and how she didn't feel represented in media. And that's when I decided that I wanted to combine both of our stories, and Blue Moon was born.
So that's great. Now, what was it scary to actually self-fund this?
I think it might have been less scary to actually self-fund it, because if it failed, it was my fault, and I didn't have to answer to anybody on anything, except my accountant. But I think it was less scary because it gave me a little bit more freedom, and I think, I self-funded it using my college fund that I never ended up using, and I think college funds are generally there to put you through college and then hopefully give you a career, and I think that Blue Moon did the same thing for me. Like I call it a really expensive business card now. And I think that it really served its purpose. I mean, I felt like I went to film school in the 3 days that we shot it. It really was a crash course into everything, because I knew how to do nothing. I just am an actor and convinced people I knew how to do something, and then just hired people smarter than me, and it all worked out. So yeah, less scary self-funding.
All right. So did you already have who you wanted to cast in mind?
I did, yeah. Olivia Barris, who plays Maya, she and I went to acting school together like 5 years ago. And then she and Audra were already really good friends. Audra, who plays the other character, are really close friends. And so when it came down to who I wanted to cast opposite her, there was a certain level of, well, I wanted free labor, first of all, like free talent from friends. That was kind of the first thing. And then Olivia, it was important to me that she was in it. I love her very dearly. We have a very collaborative friendship. But then when it came down to picking someone who she had really great chemistry with, Audra kind of popped to mind. And the fact that they were already so close was really helpful, and gave a dynamic that I don't really think I would have been able to buy or cast. So that's how that happened. I don't think I would have. I think that the film was meant for those two. Like once they were cast, the characters were kind of molded around them, and both of them are queer as well. So their stories kind of became a lot of the background for the characters, especially the scene where they're sitting on top of the roof of the car on Mulholland. A lot of those stories that they tell on the roof were kind of emulated by some of their own personal stories, because I wanted it to be as authentic as possible, and have them feel like they were a part of it as well.
So how was the learning experience, making it? Like you said, it took 3 days, correct?
Filming took 3 days. I also, again, had no idea what I was doing. Now it's like, I'm actually currently on the other side of this wall. My producer and editor are editing my next project. I just took a break to do this. But this has been a whole other process for Blue Moon. It was 3 days of actual principal filming. I wrote the thing in like 2 weeks in my pajamas. This next project, just for reference, I wrote it the span of like 5 months. So it was very different. And then like pre-production was maybe a month. And then we shot it in 3 days. And then we basically did all of post in 2 weeks, and it should have taken 2 months, but we crammed it all in to make a festival deadline. I was like literally in Miami for a bachelorette party, like working on graphic design logos, like while they're all in the club, So it was a very tight squeeze process. And it was, in filmmaking, things go wrong all the time. Like you're just basically fixing things. And I think that I learned so much the first time, and the team I'm working with the second time is different than the first. And I was glad, though, that I had the team that I did on the first, because of some of their errors, I learned more than I would have otherwise. And I'm glad that that came really early on. And it all worked out. Knock on wood, it all worked out.
Yeah, well, it is an amazing short. So
Thanks.
we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our guest.
And we're back with Emily Ruhl. So how did it feel doing the directing instead of being directed?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. My entire life, I've been kind of told what to do behind the camera. So, um, and my younger brother will tell you I'm very bossy and that this translates well for me. No, but I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I feel like because I have acted, I understand kind of how to communicate to actors. I get it. And because I've been on so many sets before and this is my own set, making sure that there's like proper craft services that's not just pizza. Do you know what I mean? Like just the conditions of the set I feel like are really great on my set because I've been on so many shitty sets. Sorry, I cursed. But
You can curse.
oh great. Hell yeah. I think that there was a removal of a lot of self-consciousness, which is really interesting. I think being on the camera for so long, I became, well, modeling and acting in general, you just become very aware of your surroundings. We're in directing. I'm like so laser focused into what's happening right now. On the second project, I act in it as well as direct it. So that's a whole other kind of juggling act that I really enjoyed. And I'm very glad that that also turned out well because I didn't know if I could do that. Um, but yeah, I think directing is like where my heart is for sure.
Yeah, me too. Now, was there anything that you hadn't done before that surprised you by being easy?
Maybe the whole thing.
Okay,
Maybe
that's a
the
good
whole thing.
answer. That's a good
Yeah.
answer.
All of it, all of the above.
So what would you and what wouldn't you apply from Blue Moon to your next film project?
Well, it's interesting because now, just because we're in editing right now, um, I'm thinking about, the last time we were doing this. It's interesting to see how much better my writing has gotten over, the last year, basically. And just character development and overall story arc. And, I think that Blue Moon is really meant to live as a feature eventually. And I think this next project is a TV show. But I think
Hmm.
for me, what I learned more has just been about the writing and really kind of developing the characters' voices. In my next project, there's 13 characters. It's a pretty big ensemble cast. And it's also kind of semi-autobiographical, which is also very interesting. I think I also learned just what I wanted to look for in a team member. Like you're only as good as your team. And there's certain things now and certain standards that I uphold when it comes to who I hire as my crew. Because I think going to Sundance or getting your TV show sold or all of these things, it's like going to the Super Bowl, and people only go to the Super Bowl when every member of the team is the best at their job, and making sure that I create a very safe and collaborative environment. I always call it like a collaborative dictatorship where I want people to share their ideas because I don't know everything, but I have a very strong kind of backbone when it comes to filtering those ideas. Um, so I think just like the community mentality that I wanted to create, what I looked for in the people that I hired, those definitely translated to the next project. Um, and I think what I wouldn't do again, well, I think what I wouldn't do again on Blue Moon, which I didn't do again on 13 Stepping, is I just had more help. Like I had an amazing production assistant that was supposed to be my personal assistant, but then she turned into a production assistant. But it just like I think that maybe that's something that people don't talk about, but like as a director, I really neglected any form of self-care while shooting. I barely drank any water. I barely was eating. I was barely going to the bathroom. And by the end of it, I was really burnt out. And I think coming back around this time, like I had someone who's, part of their job was making sure I was doing those things because you can get really lost, like lose track of a lot of things. And I think, especially on the second project, it's roughly based on a really dark time in my life. And I think whenever this goes to network, I think that we'll have a therapist on set. I think that could be really important and helpful in a production. And I think something I did on both was I have my amazing acting coach named Lena Jorges, and she was on set for both projects. And I think that that's really amazing because she kind of acts like a liaison between the director and the actor. And then especially when I'm acting in frame and can't see a monitor, she becomes my set of eyes, and is a really valuable resource and just like a very kind of comforting figure on set. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but there we go.
No, it was great. So, we were talking about her. So you wrote that song for the film. For actually, it was the theme song
Yeah.
for it. And tell us, are you going to be doing anything in the future?
Oh, I hope so. I don't think I'll like drop an album, but I think that one of the actors in 13 Stepping, his name is Johnny Sandback, and he's a very talented musician, and he also plays a musician in the show, and so I would love to collaborate with him on the score for the series. Like I think I want him to compose the series, and I will be very involved with that. But yeah, I would love to. It was quite fun. I really enjoyed it, and it's just another avenue, I think, for artistic expression. And when it works, it's great. So,
So, is there any part of the filmmaking process you didn't have a hand in but would like to learn?
not really. I think, like, if you ask my team, I'm like sitting next to them the whole time. Um, Something I would like to learn more about, and I realize this, is just I understand kind of the technical terms now, but I don't know as much about like the cinematography aspect. So like the names of the lenses and like really learning like all the different kinds of equipment and all of that. I just kind of in my head explain what I want and then it gets translated. But I'd like to learn more about kind of the technical side of cinematography.
Awesome. All right. We're going to take a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Wait, you want some more? Wait, you want some more? Okay. Okay. Wait, you want some more? Okay. Wait, you want some more? Okay.
And we're back with the amazing Emily Ruhl. Now, Emily, what was your biggest challenge in making the film that you had to overcome? And I think we talked a little bit about it, but what comes to mind first?
Probably like my own any ounce of like self-doubt, really. Um, I think that at a certain point there's just failing isn't an option. And so you just don't tell yourself you can't do something. But I think just even off the beginning, like there was nothing that I was like terrified by, or at no point was I ever going to stop. But I think just the initial getting over the initial hump of wondering if you can do something and then just letting that go and not telling yourself that you can't do it. And I think
Yeah,
that was probably the
you
biggest
could do
obstacle.
anything.
You can
I
do
believe
anything. Yeah,
you
exactly.
can. You can.
You sure can. So, you said you want your projects to be inspirational. What inspires you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, People and their stories, um, and different experiences other than mine, and art. But like for example, I got an IV yesterday. I got over COVID a couple weeks ago, and I've just been a little tired, so I've been getting like vitamin drips. And Nurse Madison, who's amazing and comes and gives them to me, and has been giving them to me in the studio while we've been editing, which has also been kind of fun. She's actually we're doing like a rough screening tonight, and she's coming. But she was an ER nurse, and I was like, oh my God, I bet you have some incredible stories. And she was telling me some of them. And I was just so mesmerized by her and the people and everything. And so I think that human relationships really inspire me, and what drives us and kind of the psychology the psychology behind why we are the way we are, and why we love the things we do and the people that we love and all of those things.
Hmm. Now, Blue Moon won several awards.
Yeah.
How does that feel being, it's really your first independent project?
Yeah. um, it's a nice pat on the back, like, hey kid, you're on something, you're on to something, you know, like keep going. That's kind of how it felt. I was kind of, I remember the first festival I got into, like the exact moment. And it was really cool. It was really cool because you never know, right? You do these little things. And it, you know, my friends have seen it and my friends like it, but like they better tell me that they like it. Do you know what I mean? So to see that other people enjoyed it and even getting into festivals and places where being gay isn't accepted has been really amazing. We got into a festival like in Russia recently and China, and that's been really cool for me. Um, so yeah, it's been humbly amazing.
So tell us about 13th Stepping and your
Yeah.
concept to turn it into a series.
Yeah. So 13 stepping. This is not the official log line. I've written something much more eloquent. But it basically follows an AA group in New York City and how their lives intersect and intersext with one another. It's kind of a provocative, dark comedy that explores addiction and redemption. And 13 characters, 13 episodes. Each episode is told from the perspective of a different character, with episode one being told from the perspective of my character named Lily. And it's based on my own kind of struggles with substances when I was a teenager. And right now we have kind of the 20-minute sales pitch version of what will be a 60-minute pilot that I'm writing next month with some amazing co-writers. And this idea came to me a couple of years ago when I didn't really know I could do any of this. And then while we were actually editing Blue Moon, I started writing this because I don't do well sitting still. And it's been really intense. I think for me, reliving a lot of trauma, it's semi-autobiographical, so some things are changed, but like in order to get to myself to those emotional places, I had to think about a lot of real things. And we shot over the course of 3 days as well in New York in December, and I was directing, writing, you know, acting. I did a lot, and I never like directed and acted at the same time, which was really interesting. That was actually really easy to be able to compartmentalize those two things, but it took more work to compartmentalize myself and the character. I almost didn't want to on those days because I felt like the acting and the performance was better, but it took a toll, I think, emotionally. Um, but it's been very healing, and I'm very excited to share it with people. I think addiction is something that we all have been or know someone who's been touched by. And I think that it will be a very relatable story, and hopefully I don't want to like, you know, make the claim that I'm going to help people, but I think that it can, and I think it has that potential, and at least opens a dialogue about addiction and shows kind of that we're not black and white. There's a lot of gray in the middle of all of us. That
I
everybody's
love it.
just really human and doing their best, and you know, some of us have made a left turn, but that doesn't mean we're bad people. So I think that's the story. It's very provocative. It's very sex,
I
drugs, and
love
rock
it.
and roll. It's very different than Blue Moon. The colors are like reds and blacks, and you know, like Kate Moss was my like style inspiration for my costume. It's a lot
Beautiful.
more provocative, but it's cool.
Well, what other projects do you have on the horizon that's coming out that you want to talk about?
Well, so we have 13 stepping, which has like been generally my life, and I think will be my life. I've had a few people pitch me books to option. There's one about like the Mad King of Bavaria that's very interesting. If anybody doesn't know that story, they should Google it. He is wild. He built the castle that Disney replicated their castle after, and everybody said he was mad, and then he died suspiciously. It's a wonderful story that I think would be a great limited series. Oh, and I just started a production company called Public School Pictures. So all of these, you know, pictures will be done under public school, which is super cool. But right now, 13 stepping is kind of everything. I'll be writing the actual pilot and the story Bible in the upcoming months. Blue Moon, we just have a sales agent for that project, so that should be on a streaming service very soon, and that's very exciting. That just happened. But I think 13 stepping. That's I have a feeling it's going to be a large part of my life for a long time. And, you know, we even have ideas of each season being in a different place. You know, so maybe season two can take place in a rehab, season three can take place in a small town. It kind of keeps living in
That's
different
beautiful.
casts every
Smart.
season. So, and I think that it can really take place anywhere because AA meetings happen anywhere.
That's true.
And that might not just serve a creative purpose, but might serve this like internal purpose that I didn't really know I had until we started making this, and I started telling people about it whose lives have been affected. And I think it's a much bigger thing than I really realized. So I have a feeling that's going to take up most of my time.
Well, that's amazing. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with the conclusion of our story.
And we're back with Emily Ruhl. So Emily, before we wrap things up,
Yes.
we have one last question. If you were interviewed, what question would you ask? And what would the answer be?
If I was interviewing, what
Yourself.
question would I ask?
Yeah.
Myself? Oh, man. I think I would probably ask myself, like, where do I want my career to go? Because it's just started and I have some of those thoughts. And I was actually just talking about this with my team in the other room. And I think my answer to that is I'd really like to be doing this as long as I humanly possibly can. You know, my idea now, like when I date people, I'm like, you know, I want to bring my kids to set. You know, that's what I would like. I would like to really be a working mom and be able to give that example to my children. And I think, you know, to do both of them is a very hard thing. And I think I want to make sure that both of my lives are really well integrated. And I'd like for this to be a family affair, you know, and I'd really like to be able to write and direct and act as long as possible, as long as the stories are great and what I have to say is important. And I feel like, you know, for the first time, I know what it's like to live with a purpose, and that's a really cool thing. And I didn't realize kind of how boring life was before, you know? And now I have something to say, and I kind of kept my mouth shut for most of my childhood and adult life. I was seen and not heard. So it's cool to be heard now. So thanks for listening.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure visiting with you. Look for Emily Ruhl in Newness on Netflix, Blue Moon on Vimeo, and listen to Emily's composition, Her, on Spotify. You can follow, like, and subscribe to Emily on Facebook under Emily Ruhl /exception to the rule, on Instagram under Emily_Ruhl, and on Snapchat at Emily Ruhl, and on her website, www.emilyruhl.com. You can also see the trailer for Blue Moon at www.bluemoontheshort.com.
And as always, thank you for tuning into Mupo and Friends, courtesy of Mupo TV. And you can catch all our shows and many other shows at www.mupoentertainment.com or www.mupotv.com.
This is Jessalyn Pearson with our host, Michelle Mupo. Until next time.
Have a Mupo awesome week.